Welcome to the eCommerce podcast with me, your host, Matt Edmondson. This is a show all about helping you deliver e-commerce wow. And I am chatting today with my very special guest, Björn Ognibeni. We are going to be talking about why e-commerce has remained largely unchanged for many years. And is all that about to change? That's the question of the day. So we're going to get into that. But before we do, the usual shout out for the newsletter. If you haven't done so already, head over to our newsletter and sign up for that. We would love to stay connected with you. We send you the notes, the transcripts, and all that sort of stuff, along with our very new, shiny, beautiful newsletter thing that gets sent out. And it's beautiful and it's wonderful. But just go to ecommercepodcast.net and sign up for it there. But before we get into today's conversation, let me give a short shout out to Friedrich Schwant, who connected Björn and I today. If you haven't done so already, Friedrich and I talk about the science behind data-driven e-commerce, and it was absolutely fascinating. And that episode is live on the site as we speak, so go check that out. Now, let's talk about our guest for the day. Mr. Björn Ognibeni, a digital strategy maverick with over 2 decades of experience, who's helping bridge the gap between companies and their customers in our rapidly digitized world. Oh, yes, he is. When he's not teaching at Hamburg School of Business Administration or directing XR research at the University of Munster, you'll find him decoding China's digital innovations for Western executives through his think tank, ChinaBriefs.io. And he's dropping knowledge bombs everywhere in publications like Focus and Handelsblatt. And I hope I'm not butchering too much, Björn, the German pronunciation for some of these things. I'm very sorry if I am. But warm welcome to the show. It's great to have you. Thank you for joining us. And I'm loving the backdrop too.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
No problem. No problem.
Maverick sounds good.
Yeah, everyone loves the word maverick. If you're a man of a certain age with the Top Gun movie franchise, everyone just loves the word maverick, don't they? Yes, I'm Maverick. No, you're not. You're Goose. You know, those kind of things. It's funny, isn't it? So behind you on the screen, I see a dragon. I see some Chinese letters. Do you know what they're about?
Yes. Do you know how Chinese letters work?
I have absolutely no idea.
The interesting thing is with Chinese letters that every letter has a meaning, and when you combine them, you create a new meaning. So that's different from our letters or syllables. Yeah, that doesn't make much sense alone. And that one here, I think maybe you can guess it what that means. It's actually extremely simple. It's middle.
This is where my ignorance is just going to blissfully become aware to everyone.
It means middle of something.
Middle of something.
Middle.
Okay.
And this means country, kingdom. And if you combine these two, like country and middle, guess what you get?
Middle
China.
Country. China. Okay. So this is okay. Fair play.
The Middle Kingdom.
The Middle Kingdom. Yeah, of course. The old ancient novels. The Middle Kingdom.
So that means China, and the one above means digital. And so the whole thing means digital China.
Ah, very good. I feel like I'm learning already. This is great. So digital China. So you've obviously got involved with, you're one of your companies, China Briefs. You've obviously got involved with trade with the East then, haven't you? And you understand China. I'm just reading through your notes and the bio, Björn. You seem to have become quite an expert in this whole area.
Yeah, well, my usually joke when I introduce myself is not maverick, but being a practical visionary. And that's only half a joke, because that's actually what I do. I try to find new, interesting ideas. Yeah, that's the visionary part. But I do a lot of keynotes and do teaching at universities. But I always try also to help companies use these trends and actually drive value with them. And that's the practical part. And being a practical visionary, I always need to find new trends. And sometime like 10 years ago or so, I realized for this, I used to go to the US, to Silicon Valley, and at some point I realized there's not much new coming out of Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
And that was, I go every year to South by Southwest in Austin. Really love the whole festival. And it used to be that when you come back, you have something on your phone that the whole world talks about that for the rest of the year. Like Twitter was launched there.
Yeah.
And I think it was 2014 or so, I did a speech there, and I realized there isn't much new coming out of South by Southwest. And then I realized there isn't much new happening in the Western internet in general. And at one point, I was invited to come on a tour with Accenture to China. And I didn't know what to expect, was just interested. And I realized that all the new things that I was missing from the US are now happening in China. And nobody here knows anything about this. And so that was the point where I started to look more into China's digital trends and helped explain companies here in the West that don't have anything to do with China, mostly, to learn from China the same way we normally look to Silicon Valley for new trends and learn from them. So that's
really
basically the idea behind China Briefs, but also behind what I'm doing.
And so you've been going in and out of China then for a little while. Are you still going to Austin?
Yeah, well, because of COVID, I haven't been going there.
Well, that's true.
Quite some time. I started going. Now it's easier than ever because you no longer need a visa for short-term stay. So I invite everybody to go and visit. But I can do all my research also just using the internet. But being in China is actually something that I recommend for everyone, because being there and seeing what's happening there, experiencing what happens when one of the biggest cities like Shanghai or Shenzhen or Beijing are totally quiet, because all the cars are already electrified. It's not a distant future. It's something that's totally normal. Things like this. When you are there and you're experiencing them, it's much easier to understand why it's so interesting. But you can get all the latest and interesting things also from just online sources.
Do you think, I mean, listening to you talk, and I get why you would say there's been not much innovation from the West where the internet is concerned, with probably the exception of AI, which has been the big thing everyone's talked about maybe the last 18 months. But you're right. I think, I'm an Apple guy, and Apple News is awash of leaks of the new iPhone 17. And you know that the iPhone 17 is going to be remarkably similar to the iPhone 16. It's just they try and jazz it up and make it sound really good. But fundamentally, there's not really that much innovation there. And so I'm curious, with that sort of mindset, if I think about the world of e-commerce, I've been around since 2002 in e-commerce. So I've been doing it 23 years now, which is a really long time. The basic essence of e-commerce has not changed in 23 years. The fundamental structure of an e-commerce website, the product page, the image, the add to cart button. There's not been that much innovation. What we've done is we've made the internet faster, and we've made code a lot more complicated. And now we've brought in things like AI, so the stuff that we show you is maybe a bit more relevant, with personalization. But there's not been massive innovation there. I don't know if I'm being a bit doomsday-ish, or whether you would see the same thing.
Yeah, but the funny thing is, I totally agree with you, but nobody knows anything. I realized that. Yeah, if I tell people that e-commerce never really changed, then people would say, yeah, but that's because e-commerce is like that. Yeah, what should change there? And that's also the reason why China is so interesting. I mean, there are a lot of very interesting countries in Asia besides China. but they are all living in the same digital ecosystem. I have a lot of friends in India. They are all on LinkedIn, Instagram, WhatsApp. We are all in the same digital ecosystem, and they are all looking to the US for guidance. And China is the only place in the digital space that's being locked up for political reasons, with all the problems that are connected to this. But because of this, things developed in a totally different way there. And that's why it's so interesting. If I need new ideas, I look at places where things are different, not where everybody's doing more or less the same. And e-commerce is a pretty good example for this, because as you said, our e-commerce was always search-driven. Somebody like Google. You want to have something, you have a search bar, you get a product listing, you get a product details page, you put it into some kind of shopping cart, and then you have a log-on process, and then you have a logistic process, and that's it. That's e-commerce, right? And that never really changed, and nobody realized that it should change. And that's the other thing. It's not like people are asking for something different. And in China, you have a different e-commerce paradigm that's parallel to this. Our e-commerce paradigm grew out of the idea of what's the mission of e-commerce? Making things easy. But like 20 years ago or 25 years ago, when we thought about why do we need e-commerce, we realized e-commerce makes things easy. I don't have to go to a shop. I don't have to check if stuff is there, go to another one to see if there is something that was totally normal 20 years ago. It's something that we don't do now. So that's the easy thing we have covered. And that's the same in China. And in China, they at a certain point said, okay, we have this easy thing, but how about making shopping exciting? Creating experience. And that's a goal that then we never had, I think. And out of this grew something that you could call discovery-driven e-commerce. So it's not Google, it's more Instagram or TikTok. You don't go to Instagram or TikTok to look at this, to find a specific picture or video. You go there to look at videos. And to get entertained by videos. And that's the basic paradigm for a lot of e-commerce companies in China. You don't want to go there, or let the customer find what he wants. He doesn't want anything. He wants to get entertained. And so you create a totally different experience. And that's why people come to your site, and then suddenly you have a totally different e-commerce system. That also needs, for example, totally different KPIs. If conversion is your main KPI and people just come to hang out, what happens to your conversion? It suddenly becomes a problem because it's too low. But it's totally fine to have people just hanging out. Why not? And that's actually, that all sounds totally new, but it isn't that new. A classic mall worked like this. Was a place to hang out. A normal retail shop used to work like that. I just go there to browse through things. If I want to buy anything or not, we'll see. And there's another interesting use case that's missing from our internet is I can go with friends to the mall and browse through shops together with others. That's a use case that I think is not very unusual. How do you do this online? How do I go to some kind of e-commerce shop with friends to look at what's there? It's something that I could send you a link on WhatsApp, and then you also go to a web page and then something like that. But it's not really, and it's not really an experience. And that's something that you can find in China. You see there on Taobao, they have a function where you I have the Taobao app open. I hit a button. The app connects me to a friend, just like what we are doing here. Yes, screen sharing and looking at the screen. We look at the shared screen, which happens to be it's a shop. Yeah, it's technology-wise, it's totally uninnovative. Yeah, it's not really spectacular innovation that's going on there. And then we both look at the same shop and talk to each other, and then
at the same time
browse through the shop together. That's a very simple use case, and nobody here in the West has even thought about it.
See, this is really fascinating to me, Bjorn, and partly because, right, the last 3 days, I try and write a post and put it on LinkedIn every day. I try and be active every day on LinkedIn. I'm a big fan. And for the last 3 days, right, this is why this is timely, I have been talking about old brands that, for whatever reason, didn't seem to cut it in the e-commerce digital world. The obvious one being, and the one that I started with being Blockbuster, the video rental store. I don't know if you had those in Germany, but we had them here in the UK, and you would go and you would rent your film and all that sort of thing. And how everybody uses this as an example of a company that didn't innovate, and therefore they're not around anymore. And Netflix, has dominated, and Blockbuster should have been Netflix. And you listen to the stories and you go, yes, because on the surface that makes sense. But the last 3 blog posts I've done, I'm like, well, hang on a minute. Have we thrown the baby out with the bathwater? I don't know if that phrase translates into your German ears, but it's have we missed a trick here? Because here's the thing, when it comes to Blockbuster, I have some great memories of Blockbuster because I had to go to the store. I went with family. I went with friends. We decided together what movie to watch. We couldn't watch what we wanted whenever we wanted to watch it because they weren't always in, We got the popcorn. There was the smell. There was the sort of the effort to go and get it. And in the name of convenience, we seem to have... Everybody was like, oh, this is brilliant because I can just go to Netflix and decide what to watch. Not that we can, because there's so much to watch. We're sort of paralyzed by choice. Yeah. But what Netflix is, it's sort of like a sort of sanitized convenience, I think I called it. Whereas Blockbuster, for all its quirks and for all its lack of innovation, there are many people in my generation that will be able to give you some kind of memory that is linked to the Blockbuster store. I cannot give you a single memory to a Netflix adventure. I just can't. I can tell you the TV show that I watched and I thought it was great, right? And so I'm intrigued by this because I think e-commerce in the West has gone down the same route that Netflix has gone down, the same route that Spotify has gone down, the same route that a lot of these sort of stores have gone down, which is speed and convenience. Amazon is fast and it's convenient. I can search what it is that I want. I have to know what it is that I want first and foremost, but if I know what it is that I want, I can go and find it quickly and easily. But we seem to have lost the soul of that. One of the things that came up in those conversations is the mall. So you would go to the shopping centre, the shopping mall with your friends, and it was events, right? You would go there for the day. You would browse with your friends. You would look with your friends. And I think Western e-commerce seems to have forgotten that. So I'm kind of curious that the e-commerce in China seems to have engaged with that.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why things are like this is we don't invent. We invent something when something is new. Yeah, when there was no e-commerce, we had to invent e-commerce, and there were a lot of innovation. And so at a certain point, we are finished. Yeah, it's ready. Yeah, e-commerce was ready or finished, and at that point, we have KPIs, and we optimize these KPIs. And convenience, how quick things are, how cheap it is, lowering costs. These are all very handy KPIs that we can optimize. Everything that we can put into Excel charts. How do you optimize experience? Kind of difficult.
Difficult to measure,
let's try to drive down costs. That is much easier. And that's probably one of the factors. And the other thing is, in China, you have so much competition that companies don't get finished with anything. Yeah, if you have something that works today, you know that tomorrow will be 5 other guys who do the same, but they can only copy your yesterday idea, maybe the one that you had today, but you know you have to have another one tomorrow. If not, you won't survive. And this kind of competition and pressure make sure that you have a lot of innovation in these systems. And that's probably also a reason why things are so different there. Here, we don't have any competition, if we really think about it. Yeah, if you look at, I'm an economist by training, and the situation where our whole market economy is not supposed to create giant corporations with giant surpluses and even more giant market values. That's actually a sign of a system that doesn't really work. Yeah, because the prospect of getting giant earnings is what should drive our system. Because if somebody earns a lot of money, others should come and take it away from him through better innovation and better ideas. Yeah, and,
that's free market economics in a nutshell, exactly, isn't it?
That's not what we see when we describe what we have, and that's not an e-commerce topic. That's a whole digital ecosystem topic. Yeah, you mentioned Apple. Yeah, they have no real competition. Yeah, they have great products and they have a lot of satisfied customers, but the innovation is very small from as you mentioned. Yeah, because there is no competition. Yeah, and the same with Meta and with and e-commerce is the same, right? And the reason I focus more on automotive and totally different areas than e-commerce, but e-commerce came on my radar because of Shein and Temu. And these are companies that suddenly arrive here and take away a lot of revenue from companies who don't expect any competition. And that's the reason why I became interested in the whole e-commerce sphere. And then that's also where I realized how little has changed over the years.
Yeah, it's a fair point. And I mean, having purchased from Temu, the app, and you know, some of these Banggood and there's another one that I've looked at. It's interesting, isn't it? Because some of the stuff, if I'm honest, when I'm on the apps, I just found annoying or I found garish, and that part is, you know, my Western mindset, isn't it? It's just I'm culturally not connected with what's going on here. I must get an email from one of the Chinese websites every day going, "Oh, sorry, we forgot that, you know, something with your order. You're entitled to a discount," and all this. It's like, really? Okay. And so, some of the things I do find a little bit odd, but I appreciate that that's a cultural thing. One of the things I guess that I've seen, and I think is a topic of massive conversation at the moment, is what is being coined in the West, social commerce. So you mentioned TikTok, for example, and how TikTok seems to be disrupting the game quite considerably as long as Donald Trump doesn't turn it off again. You know, it's that kind of, certainly for the States. But I was always surprised that 3 years ago, Instagram didn't allow you to buy products on their platform and they took a cut of all the sales. That just really surprised me that they didn't do that. I'm really surprised YouTube hasn't done that yet, because it just tells me, I just think the platforms are rife for it. And I think TikTok, you know, comes along, the little upstart, and starts adding that, and all of a sudden, you know, the US is like, well, it's Chinese, you can't use it because it's Chinese on, and we're going to shut it down. And Instagram is going, well, do we need to do social commerce? And I find it fascinating. And so I'm seeing play out what you're talking about, for example, with TikTok and with Instagram, and how TikTok has innovated, and Instagram, which has all the money of Zuckerberg behind it, and Facebook and WhatsApp and all of that data and all of that knowledge, has done relatively little other than try and get me to spend more on my ads.
Yeah, and you see the same digital stagnation in these services, right? I mean, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, they all never really changed. I think the most change on Instagram was driven by TikTok. Because they suddenly showed up and did something totally different, and all the advertisers went there, and then Mark Zuckerberg said, hey, look at this, I want this too. But it never really evolved from the thing that was finished at some point in the past. And the real innovation with e-commerce on TikTok is not that you can sell it on the app. It's that you don't have to link to a different place. You can buy it within the app. And TikTok is also making sure that you get your stuff, doing all the hard fulfillment part. And that's something that everybody in China does and nobody here does.
Yeah,
I mean, Meta and all the other companies have a very solid, well-working business model, and that's ads. And everything that distracts from this is probably bad. And if you suddenly have to handle the packages and have to have hotlines for customers because they buy something from your platform, that's something that you try to avoid. And so you stick to your basic business model, selling reach. And what you do is you outlink to a different shop. And that's something that actually works pretty well, as we all know. Buying something on Instagram, meaning clicking a link and then going to a shop. And Instagram earns money, the shop sells something, but the conversion rate is probably not very good. Because you always have the problem with sign up, email registration, and all these other things. I think there was some interesting experiment. I'm not sure how well this actually works, where Instagram and Amazon together created an integrated checkout process. Is that something?
Yeah, I have some vague recollection of this, and it never really took off. I'm sort of racking my brain, and I remember it didn't take off.
Wonder why. Really interesting question. I have no idea, but that's something that would be natural, right? That somehow you have a very smooth buying process within these platforms, and that's something that everybody in China does. Social commerce here doesn't mean anything social, right? It's just something that we call social media, which also usually isn't social. And
ironically, that,
yes, you click on something and you buy something, and then the whole thing becomes social media, social commerce. And have you heard about Xiaohongshu, Red Note? Because that's a very, very interesting case. As I said, our social media is not really social. I think we all know that. It's a place where we hang out to see ads and then some content.
Place where we go to get mental health issues.
And that's the other problem. Well, that's the side effect. And social media in China is totally different. You have a really social experience. And all the stuff that makes social media in the West so miserable is missing in China. And we don't know anything about this because we don't know any Chinese social media services. TikTok is the one exception. And when the TikTok ban loomed 2 weeks ago, millions of TikTok users under the hashtag TikTok refugees joined Xiaohongshu. Xiaohongshu is somebody told them that this Xiaohongshu is the Chinese TikTok, which isn't, because Douyin is the Chinese TikTok, which is owned by the same company. It looks more or less the same, different content. But suddenly you have an influx of millions of Western users to Xiaohongshu and getting an unfiltered, authentic Chinese social media experience. And that was an extremely interesting experiment because everybody liked it. Yeah. Suddenly, if you search for TikTok refugee on TikTok or on Instagram, you see lots of videos from people who describe their experience that social media can be totally different. People were so welcoming and had really good conversations, and all the stuff that makes life here so miserable isn't happening there. Yeah? Because every social media service in China tries to create the atmosphere of a neighborhood bar, where you come hang out with friends, have nice conversations, because that's the place where people like to be.
Yeah.
It's the Western social media cage fight thing. I don't know why it's so successful, but it's counterintuitive. If you want to create a good atmosphere, get people to be social, you don't go into a bar where everybody's fighting with each other. You leave and never come back. And for some reason, this model was a prevailing model in Western social media, and that's what everybody is doing. And that's not the social media thing in China. And there, it's really social. And that's a much better atmosphere to sell stuff. To get recommendations, to talk about products. And so the whole Xiaohongshu thing, or in Western world, it's called Red Note, the app is Red Note, was an extremely interesting experiment because it showed that the Chinese version of social is very compatible with Western consumers or users.
So it'll be interesting to see how that changes things over the next few years. It'll be interesting to see.
Now we have TikTok back, and probably a lot of people move back. The interesting thing is it's also a very interesting case of China speed, because Xiaohongshu had an app in the Western App Store, but it was not really localized. There were some English navigation elements, but most of the stuff was just Chinese. And I think their main target group were just Chinese people who are expats in Western countries. So Chinese users downloading the Western version to get into the Xiaohongshu in China. And it took Xiaohongshu 3-4 days to localize the whole app. Within just a couple of days, you had all the navigation in English. You had translate buttons on all Chinese postings. It was extremely fast. And that's also an interesting learning, how quickly you can do this. And the interesting question is now, does Xiaohongshu use this as an opportunity to grow their business here? Nobody knows. Not sure if even Xiaohongshu knows this, how they make use of the situation. But that's extremely interesting, I think.
No, fascinating how fast and that change was brought about. I mean, goodness me, 3 to 4 days. You imagine you wouldn't. I just don't know. It takes Apple 6 months to make some changes to the way they do news notifications. So I'm not holding my breath. What do you think, Björn? I mean, I'm aware of time here, so I what do you think, knowing what you know about the market, is the biggest thing that we as e-commerce entrepreneurs can take advantage of from our Chinese, cousins? How can we look at what they do and go, right, this is one key thing we could learn to help our business?
I think the first thing is become aware of what's happening there. Because we aren't. I always like to call this asymmetric ignorance. Chinese know everything about us. We don't even know what we don't know about China. And so get rid of this is probably the best recommendation that you can get. Look at companies like Xiaohongshu and study what makes them successful. Also Tmall, for example, or Taobao and all these other Chinese e-commerce operations.
Yeah.
There are a lot of small things, like the one that I just mentioned. Yeah, social shopping, meaning thinking about how can my customers shop together. That's something that's very easy. Another thing that's missing is every Chinese e-commerce app, but also normal app, has an easy mode for senior people. Think about how difficult Amazon is actually for not somebody who's 70, but like 80. Yeah, we're in a society that has more and more older people, and they very often have a lot of time and a lot of money. And they probably would like to spend it online because all the shop closed on the high street. So they actually have to buy something online, but it's extremely difficult to do. Yeah? Not for us, but for older people it is. And that's also something there are solutions in China. Yeah, that's where you can use this easy mode to make everything a little bit easier, get rid of all the pop-ups, make the selection of products a little bit different. Yeah, that's something also. Don't copy what the Chinese are doing. That's also a very common mistake. Understand it and then adapt it to how we should do this.
Yeah,
that's probably the other recommendation. And there, it's not like there's just one thing. It's the thinking that's different, and that we should change. Yeah, becoming aware of stuff that isn't changing here.
Yeah. No, it's so important. I love that. Be aware. Just go and stop being ignorant, Matthew. Don't be an ignoramus, as my mum would say, and go and find out about stuff. Which tell us about. You've got China Blast. I was looking at the site. You've got a lot of information on there, so I guess that's a good place to start.
It's my homepage is probably a good place. I aggregate all my podcast appearances, my blog posts, and all the stuff that I write for other magazines. It's all on this site. There are also all my speaking engagements. If somebody wants to see me, that's a place to see. LinkedIn is of course another good place. And we are right now in the process of relaunching China Briefs. In a couple of weeks, we have a different team, and the site will look different, but will have the same mission. Explain companies in the West what they can learn from digital China.
Fantastic. Now, we will of course link to China Briefs in the newsletter. It will be in the show notes, which if you're listening on a podcast, you just scroll down and get them. Super easy. And of course, we will link to your LinkedIn as well, Björn, which you mentioned, and I connected with you earlier, actually. So I'm going to be following with avid interest what you post on LinkedIn. I really am. I will be on there commenting. So
one very lengthy article about the whole Xiaohongshu thing that I would recommend. That's because that's really an eye-opening experience, I think, on so many levels.
Yeah. No, fantastic. Listen, thank you so much for coming onto the show. It's been great to chat with you. Great to have a conversation. And I'm absolutely fascinated by the whole thing. And I'm going to go away and do some research and have a little bit of think about the whole thing and what it means for our business. But really great to meet you. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been much appreciated.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Great. Well, there we go. Another great conversation. In fact, let me do yes. Oh, yes. Another huge round of applause for our guest today. Now, be sure to follow the e-commerce podcast wherever you get your podcast from, because we've got more great conversations lined up, and I don't want you to miss any of them. And in case no one has told you yet today, let me be the first. You are awesome. Yes, you are. Created awesome. It's just a burden you've got to bear. Bjorn's got to bear it. I've got to bear it. you've got to bear it as well. Now, the e-commerce podcast is produced by Podjunction. You can find our entire archive of episodes on your favorite podcast app. Our theme music was written by Josh Edmondson. And as I mentioned, if you'd like to read the transcript, the show notes, head over to the website ecommercepodcast.net, where incidentally you can sign up to the newsletter and get all of the good stuff coming straight to your inbox every week, all for free. But that's it from me. That's it from Björn. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a fantastic week wherever you are in the world. I will see you next time. Bye for now.